In this video, we are going to talk about formatting output in Java. So up till now, we really haven't worried about the format of the output. We've just been using the plus sign, right, which is the concatenation operator for strings to string together messages using strings and variable names. So that approach is okay, except as you have seen, you'll get some really long decimal numbers. So with that approach, you really don't have all the control that you would like over how the output looks. Okay, so we've just been using System.out.println. So moving forward, we're going to be using System.out.printf, which is for formatted printing. And the advantage of printf is that you can completely control how the input or how the output rather looks. Okay. All right. So first off, we are going to talk about console output. Remember that is this little area down here in JGrasp. And then we'll talk about how you would alter what we talked about for console output to work with GUI output, and specifically the J option pane, show input dialog or show message dialog. Okay. All right. So first to System.out.printf. It works similar to Mad Libs if you've ever played that game before. And in Mad Libs, they'll tell you something like pick a first name, an adjective, and a number, right? And then what you will do is put those in some blanks in a sentence, and then it generates, sometimes a funny saying or expression. All right, so that's similar to how printf is going to work. We are going to have a message like this, right, or a sentence, whatever the output form of your output is going to look like. So, for instance, our own planet, which we call blank, circles around our blank sun blank times every year. So that's how you are going to put your string. You're going to have some specific words in there. You're going to have some blanks in there as well. Okay, and then just like in Mad Libs, you pick those things you picked go in the blanks in order that you picked them. Okay, so if we picked just as an example here of how this sentence would look in System.out.printf, we would have the message, right, System.out.printf, and then our message that we want, our own planet, which we call, and then the blanks are not going to look like blanks in the previous example. The blanks are going to look like a percent sign and then some codes that go with that percent sign. So here's a blank. So our own planet, which we call blank, circles around and then here's another blank. Sun, here is another blank, D times every year. All right, this %n is not a blank, even though it looks like the same format as the other format specifiers. That's what the blanks are called, format specifiers. %n is the same as /n, which will make the input go to the next line. All right, so one issue with printf is that it will not automatically go to the next line like println. It acts more like System.out.print. So this %n is kind of like a /n. You can use either. The recommendation, though, is to use %n because that works on more platforms than /n does. It's more predictable from machine to machine how this will operate. All right, so that's our message. So the first part of printf is the message that you want to display, right, with these blanks in there, ended by this %n if you want it to go to the next line. Okay. Then what comes after that you have a comma, and then for each one of these blanks that you have in here, you will need to supply a value. All right, so the first blank, I have one blank here, I have one blank here, and I have one blank here. So I will have to supply 3 pieces of information. So Fred will go in the first blank. The word pristine will go in the second blank, and the number 45 will go in the third blank. All right, so in the end, this will print the message, our own planet, which we call Fred, circles around our pristine sun 45 times every year. Okay, so that is the format of a printf statement. Okay. This is for console. Okay, for GUI output, like with JOption pane, you would just put String.format. Okay, this method will not work with JOption pane, right? So for scanner, if you're using scanner for your input, then you would use System.out.printf for your formatted output. If you're using JOption pane for your input, then you would use String.format for your formatted output inside of a show message dialog method call. Okay? Okay, so these blanks inside here are called format specifiers. Like I said, they have a little mini language unto their own. Okay? And so these format specifiers will allow you to control exactly how you want the particular piece of data displayed in the output string. Okay, so first off, it starts with a %, like we saw in the example, right? All of these format specifiers started with a %. So there we go. And they all end with a conversion character. Okay, so those are mandatory. You must have a %, you must have a conversion character. The conversion character tells Java what type of data that is going to go in that blank. So looking back at our previous example, we saw an S for string and a D for an int type. So the S makes sense. The D doesn't, but well, it does in a way, but I'll explain that when we get to that point. All right, so at the very least, in these format specifiers, you're going to have a %, you're going to have a conversion character at the end. There are 3 things that can go in between the % and the conversion character. Okay, and these are all optional. You don't have to have those. The only thing you have to have is a % and the correct conversion characters. The 3 optional things are the flags, a width, and a precision. Okay. When you put the precision, it has to be following a period. Okay. So let's talk about those 3 things in order. All right. So there are lots of flags. We are not going to go over every single one because there are many that we don't need. So let's just talk about the commonly used ones. The first commonly used flag is a -sign. So a -sign will left justify whatever is going into that blank instead of the default, which is to right justify it. So if you have this minus, it will put all of the stuff to the left of the area in which it goes, as opposed to all the way to the right. Okay. The plus flag will add a plus in front of any positive value. Okay. A 0, which is what this character is, right, will pad any numerical values with zeros. It says blanks, but it should say zeros there, so that's a typo. So zeros instead of spaces. So we'll take a look at an example of that in a minute. Comma, when you use a comma, that will separate groups of digits, right? Groups of 3 digits for numbers bigger than 1,000. So starting at 1,000, you'll get, or it should be greater than or equal to 1,000. But if you have 1,000, it will be displayed as 1, 000. Okay, so those are some of the flags that we'll demonstrate here in a second. The width parameter states the minimum number of characters to use for output of value. So let's say your width was 10, then it's going to create an area of 10 characters long for that input to go. All right, regardless if the input is smaller than 10, it will add some spaces to that input. So what's really, this is really useful when you're trying to make a table of values and you want all the numbers to line up. All right, so we'll demonstrate that here in just a second. And then the precision. All right, so the precision is, and this is probably the one that we'll use the most for the problems that we'll work on. For strings, what will happen is that with the precision, it will extract substrings. Okay, and I'll show you an example of that. For floating point numbers like doubles or floats, this parameter is going to round the number to a given decimal place. So this is the one, right, that we are going to use more often than any of the others here. We're going to use this to round double values. Okay, so the last thing before we take a look at the example is the conversion characters. Remember, those are required. S is for a string value that you're going to use. That makes perfect sense. D is used for int, byte, short, and long, so we'll be mainly using it for int, right? And you might say, hey, well, why do they use D, right, for these whole number types? And that just goes back to the early 1970s, and the control character in some other language was D for decimal integer, okay? And so it's just kind of stuck around, and that's what we use. For double on float, those are types for decimal numbers. We use F. Again, you might say, well, why wouldn't they use D for double, right? But it's F. The reason why is because double and float are what are called floating point types or floating point numbers. So the F is for floating point, which is basically, at this point, just think of it as a decimal number, okay? All right, so let's take a look at the example and how it works. Okay, so let's run this program. And you can just see a lot of the stuff. It just prints out quite a few examples. All right, and we can show the different effects that these format specifiers have on the output. All right, so first I declare a variable called alpha. Here's the old way, the unformatted way that we would use to print that out. And that gives you this. So that's using println, right? In line 18 or 19, this is the corresponding way that you would do that using System.out.printf. So these two are essentially exactly the same. The main advantage of using System.out.printf is that now I can have complete control, right, over how this is displayed. Whereas with line 15 using println, I don't have any control. It's going to print what it's going to print, and that's it. Okay. All right. So you can see how printf works. Again, it says the word is, and then %s is a format specifier. That's a blank. So the word is blank. Again, the %n, right, is just to go to the next line down. Otherwise, it would have printed this next piece, this next string, right, on the same line. And then for every one of these format specifiers I have, I'm going to have to give it a value, right? And so it's going to look at this variable word, which is alpha, and it's going to put it in that blank. And so you can see I get this. And this is exactly, it looks exactly right, the same as what I did when I printed it out on line 15. Okay, so now I am going to start using some of the optional features of the format specifier just to show you how those things work. So here on line 23, you can see between the % and the S, I have a 10, right? So that makes alpha display in a area of length 10. So since alpha is only 5 characters long, right, it added 5 blanks to that area. So I have 5 blanks and then alpha. You can see, right, that by default, when you just put a width there that's bigger than the length of the value that you're putting in that format specifier, then it right justifies it. It pushes it all the way to the right. So in the next example, I show you how it looks when you use the optional minus flag, right? And that is going to left justify. So here we have this string format specifier, a total length of 10, and the value in that area of length 10, oops, it's here, is going to be left justified. So that's what this minus flag does. So you can see, as opposed to the previous line, it pushes all the way to the left. In the next example, I use precision, right? So between the percent and the S, I have a 0.3. You can see that is only going to display the first 3 characters in the string alpha. So it basically chops it off at 3 characters and puts it in there. So you can see that's 0.3. Then, I don't know if I mentioned this one, but for strings, if I have a capital S in there, you can see it automatically converts everything to uppercase. Okay. All right. In the next example, I use an int value, right? So this is the old unformatted way of printing things out. This is the way that I want you to use moving forward, right? The formatted print. You can see I'm using System.out.printf, and then I have a blank here. I want to put an int value into that blank, so therefore I am using the D conversion character. Okay, and then of course I have to tell it what value that I want to put it in there. So here, those are these two lines, and then I just kind of run through those flags again, the use of those flags. So with 10, it makes that number display in a field of length 10. Again, that's very useful for lining things up in tables. If I use the minus flag, right, it left justifies instead of right justifies. If I use the plus flag on an integer, it adds a plus to positive numbers. Here I'm using the comma flag, so you can see it puts a comma there. Here on this example, I have a width of 10, and then I have 0 before. That's a flag of 0, right? So this number, 3,467, will be displayed in a field width of 10. Okay, and instead of padding it with spaces like it did up here, it pads it with zeros. So you can see I have 6 zeros and then 3, 4, 6, 7. Okay. All right, next up, floating point examples. Here I declare a variable called number of type double. Here's the old way of printing that with println. And here's the new way that I want you to use moving forward, right, with System.out.printf. All right, you can see that the conversion character is F for double. All right, and here I just kind of run through those same examples. So here I'm using a field width of 15. So it uses 15 characters total to display the number. Here, 15 characters with the left justification using the minus flag. Here's the plus flag, so you can see it puts a plus in front of any positive numbers. Here I use the comma separator again. So you can see it separates it with commas. Here I pad it with zeros, just like the example with int. Okay. Okay, and so Finally, we get to this precision with these decimal numbers. Again, this is probably the number one use for format specifiers that we'll have outside of test number one. All right, so you can see in this example, I used a precision of 0, right? So 0.0, and you can see it rounded that value, right, to the nearest whole number. It was 5,234.546. You can see it rounded it up, right? This value was a 5, so it rounded this up to 5,235. The next, I rounded to one decimal place, so 0.1. You can see it came out to be 0.5 here. This was a 4, right? So just rounded it to one decimal place. Here I rounded to 2 decimal place, and here I rounded to 3 decimal places. All right, so that's how you would round these numbers to a certain amount of decimal places. Finally, you can have just an example with multiple format specifiers. So here I have code name and then %-7. So this is a string, format specifier for a string. The total width is going to be 7 spaces, and the value is going to be left justified. So you can see that gives you this right here. Okay. And then we're putting the value of word, right, goes into this format specifier right here. Okay, then this is the format specifier for an int or whole number type. It's going to display the width is going to be 6, and it's going to pad with zeros instead of spaces. So that gives me this part right here. So int gets put in there, the value of that. All right, and then here I have another format specifier, and that's %,.2f. So this is a format specifier for a double or float value. The precision, right, is going to be 2. So because it's 0.2, so it's going to round this number to 2 decimal places, right? You can see right here. And then it's got this comma flag. That comma flag is going to group the characters by 3 and separate those groups with commas. So that's what we have right here. Okay. So that's the message that you have. So again, you can see that we can completely control what the output looks like, and we're only scratching the surface here. We're not going to go into any other details besides these, but if you need to do something like that, you can look up. In fact, it's in Georgia View. You can see there's under course resources in Java API, there is a link to a section in the Java documentation about the format specifiers, and you can see everything that's there. So, all right, finally, we've only been doing this for console output. So here I have a JOption pane example, and here is the value that you get. Okay, you can see it's exactly the same thing that's printed right here, but it's just printed on this message dialog box. The only thing is, right, with JOption pane, you cannot use System.out.printf, right? You've got to use String.format, okay? But basically, it works exactly the same. All I did here was cut and paste this, right, inside of a String.format. It otherwise works exactly the same. All right, so that is it on formatted output. In the next video, we will go and alter those two programs that we wrote for the area of the circle problem, one using scanner, one using JOption pane. And we will go and redo the output on those using formatted output.